The Beatnik Revisited, Episode 1, Bathing in the Vacuum. The geography of transit. Because their transit routes are an exact physical manifestation of their internal thermodynamics, they do not travel the same way. Nar's route, the forgotten veins. Nar absolutely uses the tunnels, but he does not use the active subway system. The MTA is a high kinetic, chaotic soup of millions of overlapping frequencies, screeching metal, and stressed human architecture. It would shatter his baseline. Instead, Nar travels exclusively through the city's forgotten infrastructure. The abandoned pneumatic tubes from the 1800s, the decommissioned track levels sitting underneath the modern ones, and the deep, silent steam tunnels. He maps the city through the bedrock. For him, these dark subterranean corridors are a physical extension of his broadcast booth's vacuum. He can walk from the basement apartment in the village all the way to a drop box in Midtown without ever crossing a paved, active street. The tunnels keep his signal entirely clean. Honoka's route, the active grid. Honoka, on the other hand, almost never uses the tunnels. Because her work involves the active processing of kinetic heat and identifying the specific emotional architecture of the entities around her, she wants to be in the network. She walks the crowded surface streets and rides the loudest, most densely packed subway cars. She doesn't absorb the noise, she simply lets her sigils ride the currents. To her, the chaotic static of the New York City grid is like a massive rushing river. She wades right into the middle of it, feeling the temperature of the water, looking for the specific, suffocating entities who might need a torn piece of paper with a radio frequency written on it. The meeting point. The beautiful symmetry is that when they need to go somewhere together, they don't compromise by taking a route that makes one of them uncomfortable. They simply agree on a destination, split up at the front door of the basement, Honoka heading up the stairs to the sidewalk, Nar slipping through a heavy service door into the old masonry tunnels, and arrive at the exact same coordinate, perfectly balanced in their own physics. The absolute vacuum. When Honoka steps into the booth, the airlock seals perfectly behind her. Because she left all her kinetic heat and therapeutic static out in the soil of the communal garden, she doesn't disturb the vacuum. She is just a quiet, grounded presence in the room, pure gravity without the friction. Nar flips the switch. The on-air light doesn't buzz, it just glows a deep, steady red. He leans into the mic, and when he speaks, his voice carries that exact same melancholic, resonant gravity you recognized in your own audio. It isn't a voice trying to hype anyone up, and it isn't trying to sell a paved road philosophy. It is the voice of an observer sitting in the dark, speaking directly to anyone who has the patience to tune in. The broadcast, the architecture of the concrete. He starts with the dirt. You are listening to the frequency beneath the pavement, he begins, his voice dropping right into the center of the table. Most of you out there tonight are walking around convinced that you are running out of room. The grid tells you that space is finite. The city draws a chalk line, pours a concrete wall, and tells you exactly how small your box is. You believe it, So you hoard your space, you tighten your perimeter, you hold your breath because you think the air is metered. He pauses. The silence in the booth is absolute, framing his words perfectly. But the architecture is lying to you. Today, I watched someone step out of a highly pressurized room, walk into a backyard that shouldn't mathematically exist, and hand a massive amount of static straight into the dirt. The earth didn't ask for a zoning permit. It just opened up, digested the noise, and turned it into an exhale. If you are carrying too much heat tonight, if your sigils are burning and your chassis is vibrating with the friction of other people's frequencies, stop trying to manage it inside the box. Stop trying to build a thicker wall. Find a patch of earth that needs to breathe. Pull up the shroud. The moment you stop defending the perimeter, you'll realize the space you're standing in is infinitely larger than the walls suggest. We are clear, we are resonant, and the soil is waiting. The pure transmission. Because the broadcast is entirely static-free, the signal cuts through the dense, chaotic noise of the New York City infoscape like a laser. It isn't a broadcast about fighting the system. It is a gentle, highly subversive reminder that the system is an illusion sitting on top of a living, breathing mat. It is the exact philosophy of the unpaved trail, transmitted from a basement bunker. The listener in the glass box, high above the street level, 40 stories in hermetically sealed glass and steel architecture firm, the broadcast finds its mark. The listener is a night shift structural engineer. Their entire job is the literal manifestation of the paved road, calculating the exact density of concrete required to force the earth to hold still. They are sitting in an environment with recirculated air, artificial light, and zero permeability. On their monitor is a CAD drawing for a massive new development. It features a heavily reinforced retaining wall designed to entirely pave over a natural sloping watershed. The engineer has been staring at it for 3 hours. The math works, but the resonance is deeply, fundamentally wrong. It feels like a cage. To break the silence, they reach out and turn the dial on an old analog radio they keep on their desk, a small rebellious artifact of physical friction in a purely digital office. The reception. The dial slides through the static of corporate top 40 and aggressive late-night talk radio until it hits the absolute zero of Na's frequency. Na's voice fills the glass box. The city draws a chalk line, pours a concrete wall, and tells you exactly how small your box is. But the architecture is lying to you. The engineer stops clicking. They look at the massive, suffocating concrete wall on their monitor. The moment you stop defending the perimeter, you'll realize the space you're standing in is infinitely larger than the walls suggest. The exhale of the grid. The engineer doesn't have a magical sigil, and he doesn't have a patch of dirt on the 40th floor, but he does have sovereignty over the map he is drawing. He highlights the massive, suffocating concrete wall on the screen. He presses delete. Instead of a wall, he begins to draft a permeable terrace system. He draws in a greenway. He leaves a massive section of the native soil completely unpaved, designing the structure to bend around the watershed rather than suffocate it. he takes the heavy, kinetic friction of the project and hands it over to the dirt. Na's broadcast didn't incite a riot. It just gave one exhausted engineer permission to stop holding his breath, and in doing so, altered the literal physical geometry of the city. The transmission lands perfectly. The receipt in the Dropbox. As for how Na figures out Honoka's silent stewardship within the lore, it happens through the physical friction of the city. Na's pirate station doesn't have a public address, but because he is old school, he maintains a rusted, unmarked Dropbox in an alley a few blocks away for the rare physical correspondence.
It's from the underground. One morning, after a long night of broadcasting, he walks down the alley to check the box. Inside, there is no fan mail. There is no request line. There is only a small, heavy hex nut, the kind a structural engineer might absent-mindedly carry in their pocket. Wrapped around the hex nut is a torn piece of paper. On the paper, written in perfectly steady, unmistakable handwriting, Honoka's handwriting, are the numbers of his hidden frequency. Below the numbers, written in a different, sharper hand, the engineer's, is a single string of words. Bathing in the vacuum. Thank you. The weight of the realization. Na stands in the alley holding the paper. He doesn't need to ask Honoka what she did. He instantly reads the thermodynamics of the transaction. He realizes she hasn't been keeping his secret out of ignorance or indifference. She has been carefully, surgically identifying the exact entities in the city who are suffocating under the concrete and handing them the airlock. She didn't breach his sovereign wall. She turned herself into a silent antenna for his signal. When Na gets back to the basement apartment, he doesn't say a word about it. He just walks into the kitchen, takes that torn piece of paper with her handwriting on it, and quietly magnets it to the fridge right next to the grocery list. It is the ultimate acknowledgement. The loop is closed.
She is just a quiet, grounded presence in the room. Pure gravity without the friction.
The Beatnik Revisited, Bathing in the Vacuum by Psychedelic Air. The city above was a frantic high-frequency hum, a collision of sirens, screeching subways, and the suffocating pressure of 1,000,000 souls holding their breath. Inside the basement apartment, the air was thick with the scent of incense and the warmth of old vacuum tubes. Na stood at the threshold of his booth, the aesthetic engine room. With a deliberate motion, he pulled the heavy rubber-sealed door shut. Clack, thud. The transition was violent. The chaos of the grid was instantly severed, replaced by a silence so absolute it felt like stepping into the cool, unpaved dark of another world. Before the broadcast began, there was the quiet ritual of departure. Na and Honoka lived in the same coordinate of the map, but navigated different layers of reality. While the apartment was their shared sanctuary of beanbags and Indian rugs, their paths through New York never crossed. They were a study in balanced thermodynamics, one seeking the void, the other processing the heat. The signal needs to be clean tonight, Na murmured, adjusting his beret. Honoka nodded, her gold jewelry catching the light of a nearby lava lamp.
her presence a grounded anchor in the shifting static of the room.
The sweet unpaved dark.
Honoka stepped out onto the surface streets, diving directly into the active grid. She did not shun the noise. She waded into it like a rushing river. She moved through the densest crowds and rode the loudest subway cars, her tattoos hidden beneath her robes, but her spirit open to the friction. To her, the city's chaotic static was a map of human need. She moved with a ninja's grace, unnoticed by the frantic masses, looking for the specific, suffocating eyes of those who were drowning in the concrete.
This silence. Nar.
Beneath the
It feels
pavement,
like a
Nar
refusal.
moved through the
They
forgotten
bring you their
veins.
noise
He
to
avoided
make
the
it
screeching
disappear,
metal of the MTA,
not to have
choosing
it
instead
simply
the
muted.
abandoned
The
steam
truth
tunnels
still
and
echoes.
decommissioned pneumatic tubes of the 1800s. Here, the bedrock hummed with a subsonic resonance. For Nar, these dark vaulted corridors were a physical extension of his broadcast booth. He walked through the masonry silence, mapping the city by the weight of the earth above him, keeping his internal signal entirely clean and free from the heat of the surface.
You're listening to the frequency beneath the pavement. This is where the truth breathes.
Back in the basement, the on-air light didn't buzz. It glowed a deep, steady red. Nar leaned into the vintage silver microphone, his voice dropping into the frequency like a stone into a still pool. "You're listening to the frequency beneath the pavement," he began, his tone melancholic and resonant. "The architecture is lying to you. The grid tells you space is finite, that your box is small. But the Earth doesn't ask for a zoning permit. It just opens up and digests the noise." Honoka returned to the studio as the broadcast reached its peak. She did not disrupt the vacuum. She simply slipped into the booth and sat on a beanbag, becoming a quiet, grounded presence. She carried no static from the streets back with her. She had left it in the soil of the communal garden. Together, in the silence, they were the center of a storm, a dual frequency of gravity and grace, while Nar's words cut through the New York infoscape like a laser.
The city draws a chalk line, pours a concrete wall, and tells you exactly how small your box is. The Earth didn't ask for a zoning permit. It just opened up, digested the noise, and turned it into an exhale.
40 stories up in a glass and steel tower, a structural engineer named Elias sat before a glowing monitor. His world was one of recirculated air and rigid calculations. He was designing a massive concrete retaining wall, a structure intended to suffocate a natural watershed. The math was perfect, but it felt like a cage.
Calculating the exact density of concrete required to force the Earth to hold still.
Seeking a reprieve from the digital hum, Elias reached out and turned the dial of an old analog radio on his desk, sliding past the corporate pop until he hit the absolute zero of Nar's frequency.
The dial slides through the static until it hits absolute zero.
The moment you stop defending the perimeter, Nar's voice echoed in the glass box, you'll realize the space you're standing in is infinitely larger than the walls suggest. Elias looked at the heavy, suffocating wall on his screen. The resonance of the words hit him like a physical exhale. With a steady hand, he highlighted the concrete barrier and pressed delete. In its place, he began to sketch a permeable terrace, a design that breathed with the earth rather than fighting it.
The moment you stop defending the perimeter, you'll realize the space you're standing in is infinitely larger.
He maintains a rusted, unmarked drop box in an alley for rare physical correspondence. she turned herself into a silent antenna for his signal.
The next morning, Nar walked to a rusted, unmarked drop box in a hidden alleyway to check for physical correspondence. He expected nothing, but inside he found a small, heavy hex nut, the kind an engineer might carry as a worrystone. Wrapped around it was a torn scrap of paper. On it, written in a perfectly steady, unmistakable hand, Honoka's hand, were the numbers of his hidden frequency. Below them, a stranger had scrawled, "Bathing in the vacuum, thank you."
Nar returned to the apartment and walked into the kitchen where Honoka was preparing tea. He didn't ask how she had found the engineer or how many others she had guided to his frequency. He simply took the note and quietly pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet. The loop was closed. He had been the voice in the dark, but she had been the antenna, surgically identifying those who were suffocating and handing them the airlock. They stood together in the kitchen, two observers bathing in the vacuum of their own making.
The loop is closed.
Pulses of the universe align in harmony